Over the course of 25 years in rural 19th century Pennsylvania, 5 women, each intelligent, healthy, and full of life, entered the palatial estate of Jeremiah Hartwell, a wealthy industrialist. They all brought with them dreams and hopes of a happy life in the magnificent house atop Beacon Hill. But then, one by one, they fell into the same terrible fate. After just a few months living in the mansion's master bedroom, each suffered a complete mental breakdown. The common denominator was not coincidence or a family curse, but a dark and cruel secret kept in the dark for decades. When the truth was revealed in 1835, it shook not only Millbrook County, but the entire state of Pennsylvania. The police discover not a random disaster, but a carefully planned plot to destroy the minds of the women who have ever entered the house. Join sleepy history tales as they discover the chilling secret behind the mansion and how Jeremiah Hartwell, a powerful, charismatic man, drove his 5 wives to the brink of madness using methods so meticulous they are chilling. The story begins in the town of Millbrook, a prosperous town nestled in a coal-rich valley southwest of Pittsburgh. In the early 1820s, the Industrial Revolution transformed the once peaceful farming community into a bustling commercial center, with factories billowing grey smoke along the Monongah River and newly wealthy families building lavish mansions in the surrounding hills. Jeremiah Hartwell arrived in Millbrook in 1821, an ambitious 25-year-old with a keen eye for opportunity. Unlike many other businessmen who inherited wealth, Jeremiah started from scratch, coming from a poor blacksmith family in Ohio. He learned early on that success required intelligence and a strong will. Within 5 years, Jeremiah founded Hartwell Iron Works, a factory that manufactured railroad parts, an integral part of America's westward expansion. His home, completed in 1828, stood tall on Beacon Hill as a symbol of his meteoric rise. The 3-story, 42-room mansion was decorated with imported marble and meticulously tended gardens that stretched for acres. The master bedroom, which occupied the entire east wing of the second floor, was Hartwell's pride and joy. Walls covered in French handmade paper, a 4-poster bed made from precious Pennsylvania cherry wood, and tall windows that offer views of the valley below, all create a space that is luxurious, powerful, yet mysterious. What made Jeremiah stand out was not only his wealth, but also his captivating personality. Standing over 6 feet tall, with piercing blue eyes and prematurely graying hair, he had a natural power that astonished his rivals and had society ladies vying to be invited to his parties. Young ladies of distinguished families could not stop thinking about the charming young man. And when he announced his engagement to Margaret Dunlap, the 19-year-old daughter of a prominent judge, the town exploded with joy. The October 1829 wedding was described by the local press as the most glamorous social event of the decade, with more than 300 guests gathered at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. But just a few months later, a change in Margaret began to creep in. Subtle but ominous. Margaret's sister Catherine Dunlap once wrote in a private letter that Margaret had begun to speak of the house as if it were watching her. During conversations, Margaret would suddenly stop and turn to look at the empty doors as if someone were calling her name from there. When Catherine asked what she heard, Margaret would smile strangely and say, "It's just the house calling sister. Old houses have their own language." By the summer, Margaret's behavior had become increasingly erratic. She refused to sleep in any room other than the master bedroom, insisting that the house was wrong when she was not in her right place. At first, the house staff were fond of her gentle personality, but gradually they became concerned as they witnessed Margaret's strange habit of being watched. She would stand for hours by the window, not looking out at the garden or the town below, but just staring at her reflection in the glass, turning her head gently, as if examining herself from different angles. Things came to a head on a sultry August evening in 1830. The Hartwells were hosting a dinner party with prominent Pittsburgh businessmen when Margaret suddenly stood up in the middle of the meal, walked over to the large mirror in the dining room, and began talking excitedly to her reflection. The guests stood there stunned as she pointed, seemingly arguing with herself in the mirror, occasionally laughing in a high-pitched, previously unheard sound. Thomas Peaton, a guest, recorded in his diary that she kept asking, "Why do you look so tired?" And most disturbingly, Margaret seemed to wait for an answer, pausing as if the mirror were responding to her. When Jeremiah gently pulled her away from the mirror, Margaret snapped, saying she hadn't finished. That night, according to Sarah Quinn, the head housekeeper, Margaret was found at 3 a.m. in the master bedroom, completely naked, meticulously peeling off the French wallpaper from the walls. When Sarah entered, Margaret turned around, smiled serenely, and said she needed to see what was behind the paper. Beneath the paper were ordinary plaster and wood walls, but Margaret nodded with satisfaction, as if she had discovered an important secret. The next morning, the family doctor Harrison Henley was called in to examine her. He confirmed that Margaret was a physically healthy 20-year-old woman who was suffering from severe nervous exhaustion and obsessive depression. In his report, which later became a key piece of evidence, he wrote, Mrs. Hartwell had a strange obsession with mirrors and reflective surfaces and a belief that the image in the mirror was an entity separate from herself. Most disturbing of all, she was convinced that this other self was providing her with information about the history and secrets of the house. Within 2 weeks, Margaret's condition had deteriorated so rapidly that she had to be kept under constant surveillance. She believed that all the mirrors in the house contained messages that only she could decipher, spending her days conversing with the other Margarets in each one. When her relatives tried to cover the mirrors, Margaret flew into a rage, scratching the fabric with her fingernails until they bled. The final event occurred on September 15th, 1830. Margaret gathered all the mirrors, polished silver and reflective surfaces in the mansion into the master bedroom. She arranged them in a complex pattern and spent the night conversing with her mirror selves, a secret conference of parallel souls. The next morning, Margaret lost the ability to recognize anyone, including her husband, and spoke only to her reflections, claiming that they were her real family. After consulting with doctors in Philadelphia, Dr. Henley was forced to recommend that Margaret be committed to the Pennsylvania asylum. One grey autumn morning, as the leaves fell around Hartwell Mansion, Margaret was driven away in a closed carriage, still calling out, "I'll be back soon." She would spend the next 43 years in that confinement cell, never recovering her memory, always searching for mirrors in her cramped world. Margaret Hartwell's admission to a mental hospital sent shockwaves through Millbrook society. But the public reaction revealed the complex attitudes toward mental illness in the 1830s. Some whispered that it was a hereditary disease or a moral failing, while the town's elite largely sided with Jeremiah, seeing him as a tragic figure, a husband helpless in the face of a cruel fate. At the time, conventional medicine believed that mental illness in women could stem from a variety of causes: excessive reading, or a disruption of a woman's natural role. Dr. Henley's official report to the local authorities suggested that Margaret's condition was most likely due to overstimulation of the nervous system after she had assumed a new role in society and assumed family responsibilities. That explanation was widely accepted, in keeping with the popular notion that women's constitutions were inherently weak and fragile. For 3 years after Margaret's isolation, Jeremiah Hartwell lived as a widower who withdrew from society. He continued to manage the business, but he stayed away from events. The master bedroom was sealed, the furniture covered with white sheets, and Jeremiah moved to the 3rd floor, where he occupied a smaller room. The household staff, which had been reduced to a handful of essentials, said that the master spent most of his evenings in the study, poring over medical books and correspondence with doctors about his wife's condition. During this time, Jeremiah became obsessed with studying what he called the science of mental illness. He amassed a vast library on subjects ranging from phrenology, the once fashionable science of measuring the human skull, to the latest European theories of nervous disorders. His personal diary, discovered decades later, reveals a man genuinely tormented by his wife's fate, searching for a rational explanation for her decline. In 1833, Jeremiah received word that Margaret had died in a mental institution. Her final years had been marked by severe physical decline and mental breakdown. The funeral was a small private ceremony attended by only family members. Margaret was buried in the Hartwell family cemetery in Millbrook, with only her name date and the brief inscription, "Rest in peace, my beloved wife." Margaret's death seemed to close a chapter in Jeremiah's life. But those close to her saw it transform him in subtle but profound ways. Business colleagues said that Jeremiah had become extremely attentive to every detail of his appearance and surroundings. He required that all the mirrors in his office be cleaned twice a day, and he frequently looked in them during meetings to make sure he was still normal in the eyes of others. Most notably, Hartwell began talking about marriage, but in a cold, calculating tone, not the romantic one he had previously used. He developed compatibility profiles for potential women, using the same rigorous approach he used in a business deal. During this time, he met Elena Rodriguez, the 22-year-old daughter of a Spanish businessman who had just expanded his business ties to the fast-growing Pittsburgh industrial area. Elena possessed a rare combination of brains and beauty, and she quickly caught Jeremiah's attention. But more importantly, in their conversations, she demonstrated a mental toughness that Hartwell valued. Their engagement in the spring of 1834 shocked many in Millbrook society who had assumed he would never remarry. But those who saw the couple saw that Jeremiah had regained his former confidence and charm. Eleanor looked genuinely happy, eager to become the new owner of the magnificent Beacon Hill mansion. The wedding took place in June 1834, less lavish than the first, but still elegant enough to meet society's expectations. When Eleanor moved into the mansion, Jeremiah made a decision that would have major implications for the future. He reopened the master bedroom, redecorating it entirely. New wallpaper, new furniture, and most importantly, a whole new collection of mirrors placed throughout the room. Elena took to her role as hostess of the Hartwell household with great enthusiasm and grace. She took particular pride in the master bedroom, often showing visiting ladies around, showing them the large mirrors that reflected light throughout the spacious room. She was most delighted with the large dressing mirror where she sat every morning and evening to comb her long silky hair and chat with her maid about the day. During the first 6 months of their marriage, Elena seemed to be living a happy life. She quickly became a familiar presence in local social circles, loved for her warmth, intelligence, and genuine concern for others. Unlike Margaret, who had been somewhat shy and reserved, Elena possessed a natural confidence that made her an ideal hostess, well suited to Jeremiah's receptions, who was a prominent figure in the business world. But as the winter of 1834 approached, those close to her began to notice subtle changes in Elena's behavior and habits. The first signs of her mental deterioration appeared in February 1835, in a manner that was hauntingly similar to Margaret's early symptoms, although the household staff was strictly instructed not to mention the illness to Elena. Maria Santos, the loyal personal maid who had accompanied Elena from her father's house, kept meticulous records of her mistress's changes in her private diary. These journals, found years later, hidden in the villa's attic, provide the most comprehensive view yet of this slow transformation. Senora Elena began to spend more time in front of her dressing mirror, Maria wrote in early February. This morning, she sat combing her hair for nearly 2 hours, but she didn't look at herself. She looked to the left of her reflection as if watching someone else in the mirror. When I asked her if she needed anything, she said, "She's trying to tell me something very important, Maria. I have to listen carefully." By March, Elena had developed what she called mirror conversations, but she insisted they were not self-talk. According to Maria, Elena stood in front of mirrors throughout the mansion, talking as if having a real conversation, pausing to listen and respond to questions and comments that only she could hear. Unlike Margaret's restless, chaotic response to her reflection, Elena's conversations seemed light, pleasant, and informative. She told me things about the house that I never knew. Elena confided to Maria one afternoon about the old family that lived here, the secrets hidden in the walls. She also knew how to manage a household, and she helped me schedule the staff very well. Dr. Henley, who continued to serve as the family doctor, was secretly called in for consultation as Elena's behavior became more pronounced. His private notes from this period reveal a growing concern about a strange pattern seemingly repeated from his previous wife's story. However, Elena's symptoms were different in many ways, making diagnosis complicated. While Margaret became increasingly chaotic, confused, and out of control, Elena remained lucid and alert in all respects, except for her strange connection to mirrors. The turning point came in April 1835, when Elena announced to the house staff that she had learned something of great importance from her conversations with the woman in the mirror. She claimed that her previous wife was still present in the house, trapped in the reflective surfaces, trying to warn future wives of the truth behind the walls. Elena became convinced that the mirrors contained a spiritual entity. Unlike other cases of religious fanaticism or paranormal delusions, I have seen she remains perfectly sane. In all other respects, manages her household, effectively maintains normal social relationships, and shows no physical impairments that are common in mental illness, Dr. Henley wrote to colleagues in Philadelphia. Elena's obsessions seem to be focused entirely on reflective surfaces and what she believed they revealed about the history of the house. Jeremiah's response to his second wife's condition was quite different from his response to Margaret's. Rather than rushing to seek medical intervention, Jeremiah began what he called careful observation and kept detailed notes on Eleanor's behavior. His journals from this time reveal a man struggling to understand the mysterious patterns that were emerging in his own family. Eleanor was progressing in a manner very similar to Margaret Jeremiah wrote in his diary. But there were subtle differences that led him to believe that the underlying cause was not physical, but rather environmental. Both women were perfectly healthy before moving into the master bedroom. Both developed mirror obsessions within a few months, and both claimed to receive information from their reflections that they could not have known before. With this analytical approach, Jeremiah began conducting controlled experiments on Eleanor's condition. He kept detailed notes on which mirrors triggered the strongest reactions, the times of day when the mirror conversations were most intense, and the specific information Eleanor received from her reflections. His notes revealed a systematic effort to understand whether there were external factors contributing to his wife's mental decline. The results of the experiments are chilling. Eleanor's most intense outbreaks all take place in the master bedroom from dusk until midnight, always involving the large vanity mirror that was Margaret's focal point. Conversations repeat the same theme. Eleanor asks about the history of the house and receives detailed answers about previous residents' hidden rooms and secrets that need to be kept. Most horrifying, Eleanor says, is that the person in the mirror reveals to her the truth about what happened to his first wife. Elena tells Maria that Margaret is not crazy as everyone thinks, but that she has discovered something terrible about the house or Jeremiah himself and is therefore being forced to feign insanity to discredit and silence her. The person in the mirror said, Margaret knew too much, Elena says. So she was taken away to keep the important secret. But she still tried to warn everyone through the mirrors because the truth must eventually be revealed. By summer, Eleanor's transformation could no longer be hidden in Millbrook society. She refused to attend parties unless there was a mirror in the house so she could consult the person in it about the topic of conversation. When forced to attend meetings without mirrors, Eleanor became anxious and distracted, often asking to leave early to return to her discussions with her reflection. The climax came on a hot August evening in 1835 when Eleanor announced to Jeremiah that she had learned a truth that would change everything about their marriage and his social standing. Jeremiah found his wife in the master bedroom sitting before the large dressing mirror, but this time there was no animated conversation as usual. Elena sat motionless, her hands in her lap, her deep, sad eyes fixed on her reflection. She showed me the truth about this house, Elena said, without turning around. The truth about what you did to the women who lived in this room, about why Margaret really lost her mind. According to Jeremiah's diary, Eleanor then revealed a series of shocking allegations. She claimed the woman in the mirror showed her secret passageways in the walls, secret rooms where former residents were held against their will, and evidence of medical experiments on non-consenting subjects. Eleanor has concocted an elaborate story of secret chambers and secret operations, Jeremiah wrote in his diary. She insists that Margaret discovered evidence of these crimes and that her mental breakdown was artificially induced to silence her. Most disturbingly, she believes that the mirrors contain memories of these events accessible only to women who spend enough time in the master bedroom. But Eleanor's allegations go beyond vague theories. She offers specific details about how the mansion was built, claiming that the person in the mirror revealed the existence of secret passageways connecting the master bedroom to unused areas of the house. She describes sophisticated surveillance systems built into the walls. And most shocking of all, Elena accuses Jeremiah of planning to poison each of his wives with stimulants, hallucinogens, and psychotropic substances. That headache pill you gave me. Elena had bluntly confronted Jeremiah one night. Wasn't real medicine, was it? She showed me what it did. Made women see things that weren't there. Made them look crazy to outsiders. The next morning, Jeremiah acted quickly and decisively. He called Dr. Henley to discuss Elena's worsening mental state, noting that the paranoia and conspiracy theories had replaced normal conversations with mirrors. Dr. Henley, already concerned about the similarities between Elena and Margaret, agreed that Elena was becoming a danger to herself and others. Miss Hartwell has developed a systematic delusional structure that is disturbingly reflective of the previous case, Henley noted in his report. Her insistence on secret passages and secret activities suggested a complete disconnect with reality, possibly exacerbated by the isolation and stress of managing a large household. He feared that if she did not intervene, immediately Elena would descend into the same violent episodes that Margaret had experienced in her final stages. But Elena was not to be quietly admitted to a mental hospital. In the days that followed, she began her own investigation, persistently searching for the secret passages described by the mirror. Elena enlisted Maria and several other family members to help her find loose planks cavities and secret doors. The discovery was beyond imagination. Behind a closet in the master bedroom, Maria discovered a wall that sounded hollow when tapped. Further investigation revealed a small panel that could be opened, revealing a narrow hallway just wide enough for a person to crawl through, connecting several rooms on the second floor. Inside the hallway were small peepholes that allowed the occupants to peek into the bedrooms without being detected. Elena proudly told Maria, "Those hallways are real, just like the person in the mirror said. If this part is real, then everything else must be true." The discovery sent shockwaves through the staff, but the biggest impact was on Jeremiah. In his diary, he describes his struggle to maintain control of a situation beyond his imagination. The previous landlady never mentioned these hallways when she transferred the property, and I can only guess that they were built for an incomprehensible purpose. However, Eleanor's interpretation of their significance was completely detached from reason. She saw every design of the house as evidence of a vast conspiracy against women in general and wives in particular. As news of Eleanor's discovery spread through Millbrook's gossip networks, Jeremiah was faced with unanswerable questions. Why didn't I know about these hallways? What was their original purpose? And most importantly, how to explain the terrifying coincidence that both my wives suffered from almost identical mental illnesses, focusing on the same room and those same mirrors. The pressure mounts when Eleanor's father, Don Carlos Rodriguez, arrives from Pittsburgh for a surprise visit, concerned about the rumors about his daughter. Don Carlos is a shrewd businessman who does not accept convenient explanations for unexpected problems. His meeting with Jeremiah one tense evening raises pressing questions. My daughter says she has uncovered evidence of criminal activity in your family, Don Carlos says sternly. She also alleges that her mental condition was artificially induced by drugs you administered without her knowledge. These are serious allegations that cannot be dismissed simply because they come from someone whose sanity is in question. Just when it seems like everything is out in the open, the horrors of the Hartwell mansion only deepen. If this story gives you goosebumps, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Don't forget to like our content and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on more stories like this. The confrontation between Don Carlos and Jeremiah Hartwell takes place in the mansion's library, a room that is notably devoid of any mirrors or reflective surfaces. Elena insisted on being present for the meeting, believing that she should consult her advisor before making any major decisions about her future. When told that there was no mirror in the room, Elena became upset and demanded that a hand mirror be brought to the meeting. "I cannot discuss important matters without her guidance," Elena insisted. "She knows things about this house and its history that no one else does. She tried to protect me, just as she had protected Margaret." Don Carlos's reaction to his daughter's behavior was different from that of those who had witnessed it before. He did not rush to dismiss Elena's accusations as the product of a hallucination, but instead asked very specific questions about the information she had received from the man in the mirror. "Tell me exactly what the man in the mirror revealed about the previous residents of this house," Don Carlos demanded. Elena's answers revealed details that seemed impossible to know: a detailed description of the mansion's original owner, architectural features that predated Jeremiah Hartwell's ownership, and most shockingly, exact details of financial transactions and business dealings that had taken place before she had even set foot in Millbrook. Jeremiah's attempts to explain this away as mere coincidence or lucky guesswork were foiled by Elena's uncanny accuracy. She described business associates Jeremiah had never mentioned, accurately recounted private correspondence between him and investors, and most notably recounted conversations that had taken place in the library years before she had set foot in the house. "The person in the mirror sees everything that happens in the house," Elena explains. "She has been watching and listening for years, gathering information on all the residents and visitors. She knows about secret business dealings, hidden financial records, and the real reason Jeremiah chose this house as his residence." As Elena continues to reveal more, a full picture emerges from a medical case to a criminal investigation. The information she provides suggests that the Hartwell mansion was deliberately chosen for its secret passageways and sophisticated surveillance systems. Jeremiah's business success may have been fueled by his ability to gather espionage information on guests and rivals. And most seriously, his marriages were not mere sentiments, but strategic arrangements designed to conceal activities that required the mantle of a prestigious family. Are you ready to delve deeper into the darkness of Beacon Hill, where 5 wives experience the ultimate madness? The real story is just beginning. The evening's discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Henley, who had been summoned by Jeremiah to give a medical testimony about Elena's condition. But Don Carlos's presence changed the mood completely, transforming the meeting that Jeremiah had intended to discuss Elena's hospitalization into a heated interrogation of the circumstances that had led to both wives' mental decline. Dr. Henley, in your professional opinion, what could cause 2 different women with no history of mental illness to develop almost identical symptoms after living in the same place? Don Carlos asked pointedly. Dr. Henley's answer revealed the limits of 1830s medicine and his growing doubts about the case. While such coincidences are rare, they are not impossible. Environmental factors, stress, isolation, and exposure to certain substances could theoretically produce similar symptoms in different people. However, The fact that both men had a strange obsession with mirrors and claimed to receive information from their reflections suggests either a shared hallucination or what Dr. Don Carlos pressed. Or perhaps both men were exposed to the same environmental agent that had a hallucinogenic effect, leaving them susceptible to hypnosis and false memories while retaining normal functioning in other areas. Dr. Henley replied. His words weighed heavily on the quiet of the library. If Eleanor's condition was artificially induced, then Margaret's similar decline is no longer a random calamity, but evidence of a systematic plot to eliminate women who discover the truth that threatens the perfect facade Jeremiah built. As the evening progresses, Eleanor's behavior becomes more erratic, but more desperate than insane. She repeatedly asks to see a mirror, insisting that she needs to confirm important details before accusing her husband. When she is refused, Eleanor describes locked rooms and secret compartments in the house, information Jeremiah insists she could never have known. The crisis culminates when Elena stands up and declares that the person in the mirror has revealed the location of the evidence that proves everything. She leads everyone to the master bedroom and points them to a wall behind a massive wardrobe. Following Eleanor's instructions, they discover not only the secret passageway Maria had found earlier, but also a hidden compartment inside a repository of documents and evidence that will turn this investigation into a criminal case. The documents hidden in the wall niches tell a story far more complex and chilling than the man in the mirror has revealed. By the light of an oil lamp, Don Carlos flips through the pages and gradually lifts the veil of secrecy surrounding Jeremiah Hartwell's activities, which have been carefully hidden for decades. The first secret is revealed in a leather notebook containing details of surveillance activities conducted from hidden passages in the wall. A series of detailed records of private conversations, personal secrets, and business dealings that were monitored and recorded without anyone knowing. The diary pages written in Jeremiah's distinctive handwriting reveal how he used this information to manipulate business deals, blackmail rivals, and gain an advantage in financial negotiations. For example, on March 15, 1829, Senator Patterson discussed the railroad plan in his parlor with his associates, confirmed the northern passage through Millbrook Valley, and adjusted his portfolio accordingly. On June 3, 1829, Judge Dunlap revealed his gambling debts to his wife in a bedroom conversation, an excellent lever for lawsuits involving the steel mill. But the surveillance was only the beginning of what the documents revealed. Another collection of letters wrapped in oilcloth and hidden under the floorboards contained correspondence with Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann, a German physician who was conducting experimental treatments for nymphomania in private practices throughout Pennsylvania. In the letters, Dr. Zimmermann describes a systematic program to induce controlled mental instability in women deemed to be threats to their husband's welfare. These treatments involved administering precise doses of various substances, including mercury compounds, laudanum derivatives, and plant extracts to induce hallucinations and disorientation while still keeping the patient conscious enough to function normally. The most subtle aspect of the method, Dr. Zimmermann wrote in a letter, is that the patient retains enough rationality to appear normal in everyday conversation while developing specific obsessions and delusions designed to discredit any inconvenient truths he might reveal. The focus on mirrors was a particularly effective tactic as it exploited a habit inherent in women: concern about their image taken to a pathological level. Elena's accusations of being poisoned were not the delusions of a mentally ill person. It was an accurate description of a systematic program of poisoning designed to drive her into insanity while maintaining the appearance of a natural psychotic illness. The headache medication Jeremiah provided contained carefully measured doses of substances that caused visual hallucinations, especially when combined with the pressures of isolation and constant psychological surveillance. Margaret Hartwell was not simply the victim of a tragic mental breakdown. She was deliberately poisoned when she discovered evidence of Jeremiah's surveillance activities. Her increasingly erratic behavior was the result of drugs that caused her to see terrifying images in the mirror, while her attempts to communicate the truth were dismissed as the ravings of a lunatic. The most haunting discovery came from a final set of documents, revealing the true extent of Jeremiah's plan. Not only did he spy and extort from the mansion, but he also operated a vast private intelligence network using his social status and business connections to gather information for Pennsylvania's political and business elite. The mansion's secret passageways were more than just spy holes. They were part of an elaborate system that included hidden recording devices, copy rooms, and storage facilities for sensitive evidence. Jeremiah's marriages were not romances. They were business deals designed to have wives who would host him, gather information at social events, and maintain an unimpeachable facade of dignity. When Margaret discovered these activities, Jeremiah used Dr. Zimmerman's experimental treatments to discredit her and have her labeled insane. When Elena began asking similar questions, he repeated the process, confident that the medical profession's ignorance of the true cause of her symptoms would protect him from serious investigation. Don Carlos's reaction to these revelations was swift and decisive. A successful businessman with extensive political connections throughout Western Pennsylvania, he immediately recognized that the documents were evidence of a large-scale criminal conspiracy. More importantly, he understood that his daughter's life was in danger while she was still under Jeremiah's control. "Elena will leave this house tonight," Don Carlos announced to Jeremiah, "and she will take these documents with her as evidence to the authorities. Dr. Henley, I suspect you will have to reconsider your medical diagnosis of my daughter's condition in light of this evidence," he continued. Dr. Henley's response revealed the ethical crisis facing medical professionals when they discover that their patients have been deliberately poisoned by those they trust most. "If these documents are authentic," he said slowly, "then both Margaret Hartwell and Eleanor Hartwell were victims of a deliberate poisoning program designed to feign mental illness. Eleanor's condition will improve rapidly as the poisons are cleared from her system." Jeremiah's reaction to this revelation was calm, suggesting that he was prepared for the possibility of being discovered. "The documents you found are forgeries," Jeremiah declared, calmly, "created by Eleanor in her delusions. Dr. Zimmerman's letters are mere figments of her imagination, designed to support her delusions of being poisoned. I fear that her mental state has progressed to the point where she is capable of creating elaborate false evidence to protect those delusions." But Don Carlos would not let him off the hook. "Then you would not mind if we had these vials analyzed by independent chemists," he said, holding out the vials Jeremiah had administered to Elena. "And surely you would not mind if we hired a handwriting expert to verify whether these documents were actually written by you or by someone else. The confrontation might have dragged on indefinitely, if not for a sudden voice coming from the bedroom door. Sarah Quinn, the Hartwell's longtime housekeeper, entered with an uncompromising determination. "I can't keep quiet any longer," she declared. "I've seen 2 wonderful women destroyed by what happened in this house, and I won't let it happen to anyone else. Your daughter, Mr. Rodriguez, is telling the truth about everything. I saw the master of the house give them drugs. I saw him use secret passages to spy on his guests, and I saw the terrible effects those treatments had on the wives who lived in this bedroom." Sarah's testimony was the final piece of evidence that solidified Elena's accusation. As housekeeper, she had access to every area of the mansion and had been monitoring Jeremiah's behavior for years. More importantly, she had witnessed Margaret's decline and recognized that the same pattern was beginning to repeat itself in Elena. "I prepared the drugs that Mr. Hartwell gave to both wives." Sarah admitted, her voice shaking with the weight of years of guilt. "He said they were prescribed by Dr. Henley, but I noticed the vials were unlabeled, sent through private intermediaries. When I asked, Mr. Hartwell said they were experimental drugs from European doctors, not available in local pharmacies." Sarah's detailed account revealed Jeremiah's systematic deception. She described how he gradually increased the dosage of the mysterious compounds, timing the doses to coincide with the wives' time in the master bedroom. She watched as both became increasingly obsessed with mirrors, became isolated from friends and family, and gradually lost the ability to distinguish between reality and illusion. The most heartbreaking part, Sarah continued, was watching them try to recount their experiences only to be dismissed as madness by outsiders. Margaret kept claiming that someone was watching her through the walls, that food tasted strange, and that mirrors reflected images that couldn't possibly be real. Everyone assumed it was hysteria, but I knew something was wrong when Elena started recounting experiences that were exactly the same. Dr. Henley's professional reputation was shaken as the full picture of his unwitting role in Jeremiah's scheme became clear. The medications he prescribed for the 2 women's headaches and nervous disorders had been replaced with poisons secretly supplied by Jeremiah under the guise of legitimate medical care. The psychiatric diagnosis became the perfect cover for systematic poisoning, allowing Jeremiah to destroy his wife's reputation while maintaining the image of a caring husband grieving over his family's tragedy. "I need to examine Elena immediately," Dr. Henley said, his face tense as he realized the horrifying truth. If she had been poisoned with hallucinogens for a long time, there would be physical evidence. More importantly, we need to begin treatment to remove the remaining toxins. Despite mounting evidence against him, Jeremiah Hartwell remained cold and calculating the traits that had made him successful in business and espionage. Rather than continue to deny it, he turned to a prepared confession that mitigated his legal liability. "You are right. I did conduct spying from this house," he admitted calmly. The secret passages were built by the previous owner who had similar business interests, and he found them useful in gathering information about investors and competitors. "When I bought the property, I continued to use the facilities because they gave me a great advantage in business negotiations." Jeremiah's partial confession was carefully crafted to admit to the surveillance, but deny the serious charges of poisoning and conspiracy. He claimed that his wives discovered the secret passages independently and had a mental breakdown under the stress of knowing about his business activities. The drugs, he insisted, were legitimate treatments, but were unfortunately ineffective against their deteriorating conditions. Margaret became obsessed with the idea that I was personally following her through the aisles, when in fact, I was merely gathering information necessary for my work, Jeremiah explained. Her condition rapidly deteriorated into the belief that every aspect of the marriage was an elaborate drama. Eleanor unfortunately followed a similar pattern, concocting elaborate conspiracy theories to explain my otherwise perfectly legitimate business activities. This explanation might have been convincing under normal circumstances, but with the existence of Dr. Zimmerman's letters, it could no longer be sustained. The German doctor's letters were too detailed, too specific, and too clearly related to the symptoms experienced by both wives to be a coincidence. Don Carlos, a shrewd and determined businessman, had no intention of letting Jeremiah off the hook through legal hoops. We will leave it to the courts to decide whether your activities are legitimate business or criminal conspiracy, he declared firmly. In the meantime, Eleanor will be removed from this house immediately and placed under the care of doctors who are not influenced by your fraudulent schemes. The confrontation seemed to be coming to an end when Eleanor, who had sat silently for months, suddenly spoke with unprecedented clarity and calm. "The girl in the mirror has not disappeared," she said, her voice calm and clear. "She's still here, still trying to warn everyone about what's happening in this house. But I see her more clearly now, no longer blinded by the drugs. She's not a reflection, not a spirit, not a hallucination. She's me, the rational, observant part of me that's still intact while the rest of my mind is slowly being destroyed." Eleanor's discovery is a major turning point, completely changing her understanding of her illness. The girl in the mirror is Eleanor's subconscious, fighting against the effects of the drugs by creating an alternate personality capable of observing and remembering events accurately. The conversations with the reflection are actually internal conversations between the drugged Eleanor and the rational Eleanor, who is trying to piece together the truth behind it all. "I remember everything," Elena continues. "Every conversation I overheard through secret passages, every document I saw, when Jeremiah thought I was incomprehensibly confused, every detail of business dealings and correspondence with Dr. Zimmerman. The girl in the mirror was not communicating information to me, but helping me remember things I had gathered myself but was unable to access due to the suppressants. As soon as Elena recovered and Jeremiah's case was exposed, shockwaves rippled through Millbrook and the Pennsylvania business community. Don Carlos wasted no time in turning over all the evidence to the county, while Dr. Henley began documenting Eleanor's recovery as clear evidence that her condition had been artificially induced. Within days of stopping Jeremiah's drugs, Eleanor's symptoms quickly disappeared. Her obsession with mirrors disappeared, and she regained her natural lucidity, her ability to distinguish between drug-induced hallucinations and reality fully restored. Most notably, her detailed memory of what she had learned during her repression gave investigators a complete picture of the criminal network Jeremiah ran. The ensuing trial revealed the true extent of the so-called Hartwell conspiracy. Evidence gathered from secret chambers in the mansion revealed years of surveillance blackmail and information trafficking that had corrupted business and politics across western Pennsylvania. Jeremiah's clients included corrupt judges, unscrupulous politicians, and ruthless businessmen, all of whom paid handsomely for dark documents to undermine their rivals. Margaret Hartwell's tragic fate was now understood in a whole new light when her body was exhumed and autopsied using the most advanced forensic methods of 1835. traces of mercury and other toxic compounds on her body confirmed that she had not died of mental illness, but of a gradual buildup of poison during a systematic poisoning. Her death was reclassified as a homicide, placing Jeremiah under criminal investigation for murder in addition to charges of conspiracy and fraud. The Pennsylvania State Psychiatric Hospital, where Margaret spent the last years of her life, cooperated closely with the investigation by providing detailed records of her condition and treatment. These documents revealed that throughout her incarceration, Margaret remained lucid and consistently claimed that her husband was poisoning women to conceal his criminal activities. These seemingly insane statements were now recognized as authentic evidence from a victim of intentional chemical torture. Sarah Quinn's decision to testify against her employer was pivotal in strengthening the prosecutor's case. With her intimate knowledge of the family's activities, along with her meticulous observations of the deterioration of her two wives, Sarah provided investigators with a timeline that perfectly matched Dr. Zimmerman's use of experimental compounds. Her testimony also revealed the existence of many other potential victims, guests, and business associates who had complained of strange symptoms after visiting the Hartwell mansion. Dr. Zimmerman, who was found in Philadelphia, was also arrested while conducting similar experiments at a private clinic. His arrest extended to a network of doctors and businessmen who were using cures as weapons to silence troubled women throughout Pennsylvania and neighboring states. The scandal, dubbed the poisoning plot by the press, quickly rocked the public and implicated dozens of prominent men who had used this cruel tactic to silence their wives, children, daughters, and female business associates. The trial of Jeremiah Hartwell became one of the most sensational criminal cases in Pennsylvania history. Evidence from Elena's lucid testimony, Sarah Quinn's detailed account, and a series of documents discovered in secret compartments of the mansion made the case even more compelling. In particular, Dr. Zimmerman's cooperation with the investigation and his expert testimony on the effects of toxic compounds further undermined all defense efforts. The defense attempted to portray Jeremiah as a victim manipulated by Zimmerman and other accomplices, asserting that he believed his wife was truly mentally ill. However, this argument was completely defeated when the prosecution presented evidence showing that Jeremiah himself actively contacted and requested treatments that produced symptoms of insanity while preserving the victim's physical state. The jury's verdict was unanimous guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder in Margaret's death, attempted murder in Elena's poisoning, and numerous charges of conspiracy, fraud, and extortion related to the theft and extortion. The judge sentenced her to death by hanging to be carried out within 30 days of sentencing. Elena had fully recovered by the time Jeremiah was executed in December 1835. She returned to her father's home in Pittsburgh, slowly reintegrated into society, and eventually remarried a merchant who imported goods from Spain. For the rest of her life, Elena never spoke of her horrific experiences at Hartwell Manor outside of her testimony at trial. The Hartwell mansion became a symbol of the dark side of industrial America and the vulnerability of women in a society where their voices were easily dismissed for concerns that they were pathological or crazy. The house was later sold to pay off Jeremiah's debts and turned into a boarding house for railroad workers. Secret passageways were blocked, mirrors were removed, and the master bedroom was partitioned to erase the haunting memories of the tragedy. The legacy of the Hartwell plot, however, extended beyond the downfall of a criminal and his victims. The case prompted sweeping reforms in Pennsylvania law regarding the management of the mentally ill, requiring independent medical evaluations and increased oversight of private mental institutions. It also opened a larger debate about the use of medicine as a tool of oppression and the need for legal protections for women. Dr. Henley, who was devastated by his unwitting involvement in the poisoning plot, spent the rest of his life studying the effects of toxic compounds on mental health. His research, supported in part by a settlement from Jeremiah's estate, helped develop more sophisticated techniques for detecting and treating poisoning. He also became a vocal advocate for women's medical rights, arguing that female patients should be treated with the same respect and care as their male counterparts. The true fate of Margaret and Elena raises chilling questions about how many other women across America suffered similar fates at the hands of husbands, fathers, or guardians who were quick to declare them insane when it seemed convenient. Historical records suggest that the Hartwell case was not an isolated case, but part of a broader pattern of medical abuse that may have claimed the lives of hundreds, perhaps thousands of women whose stories have never been uncovered. The case also highlights the importance of listening to women who tell of strange or terrifying experiences, no matter how unbelievable or counterintuitive their stories may be. Margaret and Elena each claimed they were stalked, poisoned, and manipulated, claims that were dismissed as crazy but were in fact accurate accounts of the crimes they suffered. Today, the site of the Hartwell mansion is a small park in the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. A plaque erected in 1985, exactly 150 years after Jeremiah's execution, commemorates the victims of the attempted poisoning and reminds us of the importance of protecting vulnerable people from those who exploit their trust and power. The plaque reads simply, "In memory of Margaret Dunlap. Hartwell, Elena Rodriguez. Hartwell and all victims of medical abuse. Their courageous, often arduous pursuit of the truth helped create important legal rights that protect patients today. This story shows us how quickly vulnerable people can be taken advantage of by those in power, and the importance of listening carefully when someone tells us that their reality is not what others expect." What do you think of this story? Are all the secrets revealed, or are there still other victims that have not been discovered? Leave a comment below. If you love creepy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell and share the video with your friends who love to explore mysteries. See you in the next video.